We believe that you can build a new type of neighborhood company that might not be defined like being only successful if it becomes kind of like a unicorn, but if it becomes a entity that solve a problem for a neighborhood in a very scalable way. And when we think neighborhood, we don't necessarily think kind of a physical neighborhood, we think kind of like your subreddit. The push is really, can we help the 60% of Americans who say they would like to start something? Only 9% kind of does. Can we make it easier for them to get going? Help them identify who they should serve? What is a meaningful problem for them to solve?
I think one of the interesting parts is, like, how do founders and entrepreneurs decide what they're not into? What is not tasteful, as the case may be? Taste actually, by definition, is you're willing to say, that is not attractive to me, as much as you say that is attractive to me. So you can define it by the one minus, if you will. And so I think that's actually a place where we probably see a lot of the entrepreneurs, and our system helps entrepreneurs try to kind of encode their taste by things like, what would ChatGPT answer to this question that you vehemently disagree with?
Welcome back to Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen. And on today's show, we've got an exciting episode featuring Henrik Werdelin and Nicholas Thorne, the co-founders of Audos. Audos is revolutionizing the way for solo entrepreneurs to scale their businesses with an AI co-founder. Their AI-powered platform is enabling founders to build million-dollar businesses with smart automation, from creating landing pages to redefining ad campaigns, all without a team. In this episode, we dive deep into how Henrik and Nicholas are empowering one-person businesses to achieve massive scale with AI. We also get Henrik to open up about his journey from building successful ventures like BarkBox, and how going from dog park idea to IPO impacted his views on building enduring businesses. We also asked him to share about his experience in building a community platform called Prehype, where he incubated and launched several startups like Roman and Managed by Q. About the bold mission behind Audos, where they are helping founders create Donkeycorns, and what that means for entrepreneurs today. We also got Henrik and Nicholas to explain how their AI tools can provide taste at scale to help entrepreneurs inject personality into their products. If you're interested in the future of AI-driven entrepreneurship, or just want to learn more about the platform that's changing the game for solo entrepreneurs, this episode is packed with actionable insights. So let's dive into the tank for this week's episode with Henrik Werdelin and Nicholas Thorne from Audos. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Henrik and Nicholas.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We got
I beat you to it. I beat you to it, Henrik. I said it first.
I know you guys must be fighting for airtime all the time, but you know what? I obviously love that we got two co-founders in the tank today. But why don't we start off with you, Henrik? Give us a bit of your journey, where you grew up, your early professional background, before we get into the creation of Audos, and then we'll pass it over to you after, Nicholas.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in Copenhagen, Denmark. Grew up with a very entrepreneurial mom who kind of taught me that everything was possible. And she used to work in the National Library, and had the insight, though, of getting me into computers in an early age. So I was like one of those nerds that was totally into the internet before it was the internet. Back then it was like FidoNet. Thought I wanted to be a journalist, went to London, ended up getting an internship at MTV. Was more rebellious back then. So when somebody asked me if I could come up with a TV show about the internet, I pitched it and everybody thought it was a shitty idea. So I took it upon myself to break into the studio at 2 a.m. and do a live show. Luckily at the time, that didn't get you fired nor sued. And because a lot of people called and asked if they could see the show again, then I landed myself as a gig as running product development for MTV Networks for many years at a quite young age. Built a bunch of startups that didn't work, some big one that was well funded in Europe that didn't work. I moved to New York in 2010, worked in a small startup that ended up selling to Facebook and didn't really know what to do next. And so ended up building this halfway house for entrepreneurs that we called Prehype. And through that, build a bunch of companies over the last 15 years, probably best known for being the co-founder of BarkBox that we took public in 21.
You kind of glossed over the most crazy part of your career, but hold on a second. MTV Live. I don't think a lot of our listeners were around when MTV was even created. No. So maybe just quickly explain how big of an influence MTV was for you. Because I remember when it first aired in 1997. So, what was that like being a part of that?
What I realized in hindsight was that MTV was a TV channel that launched at the time where there was not that many TV channels and there was no other entertainment around. And so it became kind of like the social hub for a whole generation that was consuming pop culture through it. And so we were big, like at the time. And through that, we built a couple of channels that are probably better known now, like Nickelodeon and Comedy Central. But basically, in my team, we had 110 channels in 164 countries. And we built everything from computer games to SpongeBob teddy bears. And so it was owned by Viacom, and a pretty big deal at the time.
Yeah, you must have learned a lot about consumer and social, I guess, from those times as well, before there even was the term consumer and social.
One thing that I've actually thought a lot about recently is I also thought a lot about building internal culture. We used to have a boss called Judy McGrath who came up through On-Air Graphics. And she was like the CEO. And then the president in Europe with this guy called Brent Hansen. And what I think he did for Europe, where I started my career, was really just create a culture where kind of misfits kind of came in and were giving some equipment and then quite a lot of freedom to do whatever they want. And it created like this very vibrant culture that created like a lot of value. And so I think I'm almost as inspired by the freedom that was given to the team at MTV at the time.
Wow, that's really cool. All right, we'll pass it over to you, Nicholas. Give us a little sense of your background, where you grew up, your early career highlights before we jump into how you two met.
Yeah, well, my story gets pretty quickly to Henrik and me meeting because that's been a big portion of my journey. I grew up in New York, where I live today with my family. I went and worked on Wall Street out of college. That was like 2008. So an interesting moment to arrive in a professional setting generally, and on Wall Street in particular. I remember watching like 50% of the people get, moved to new jobs or moved out of the job entirely within the first month, which was certainly a sobering experience. Anyway, I would basically just tell everyone who would listen for the first couple of years of working on Wall Street, I needed an idea and then I was going to get out of there, which was some sort of kind of, I guess, recognition that I had this entrepreneurial bent and desire. I had started a company in college. So I remember buying my first Facebook ad as a senior in college for my first business, which was a delivery service for dorm essentials. Today, I'm amazed by that pitch may not actually be as dumb as it was at the time. But it turned out that it was also a lesson in learning that if you drove 20 minutes to Costco and filled up your car with printer paper and then just came back down to campus, you could sell it for 50% of what it cost you in like the college bookstore, but still make like a really nice spread on the Costco price. Anyway, I was learning about retail versus wholesale margins. I honestly called my father at some point. I was like, is this legal? Is this allowed? I'm selling this from what I just bought? And he's like, you ever notice it's called Costco wholesale? That's what wholesale means. I was like, all right, great. This is awesome. Anyway, and so finally I kept saying this, I need an idea and I'm going to get out of here. And that was also turned into a way that I just met people, because people would say, oh, well, I don't have any ideas for you, but you should talk to this person. And that led me down the rabbit hole of meeting this crazy Danish guy that was getting ready to move to New York. And he was the first person who said, oh, if that's all you need, I got good news for you because I got lots of ideas. So I'll call your bluff. And I'm very grateful that he did. I left my job on Wall Street and he and I went and started a business. In doing so, I became kind of the prototype, I guess, of this concept of an entrepreneur in residence at this thing called Pre-Hype that Henrik was starting. And we sat in these desks next to each other. And I remember the moment where Henrik said, hey, would you mind putting entrepreneur in residence on your LinkedIn profile? I was like, I don't even know what that means, but sure. As is a common joke I don't update my LinkedIn profile very often. So that's probably still there. Not probably, definitely
still there. Yeah, I looked.
That's basically what I've been for, the bulk of my career. So there's more to it than that, but that arrives us pretty quickly at me and Henrik meeting.
Nicholas, you and I feel like we walked through the same kind of paths to getting to where we are today, because when I got to Wall Street in New York in 2007 and 8, the exact same time after spending time in Toronto, I was like, I got to get out of here. Like the golden handcuffs are really good. They feel good, but they're starting to get a little too tight around your wrist. And I had to come up with an idea. But before I even came up with my first tech company idea and met, a handsome non-Danish guy, but he could have been Danish, we came up with an idea as well. But it's interesting. You had the entrepreneurial bug inside you, but you weren't really allowed to show it working on Wall Street, right?
I mean, I feel very fortunate. I'm not saying this because my overlords may be listening. I worked at Goldman Sachs. I have really talked about internal culture. I mean, it may not be a culture for everyone, but it's a culture that is very high performing. And the thing I'm most grateful for is there were people there who I can remember, like I can't count actually on two hands, the amount of people that were there at like 3:30 in the morning teaching me something. The best interest for them was to go home and
totally.
Go to bed, and they were there like teaching me how to do something. And so I'm very grateful for that. But yes, it's not a place where, if you want to be
It's a good hustle culture.
You sign over, you sign over everything you're trying to do on day one. So yeah, at the very least, you got to be very careful about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, look, it came up with the ideas for side hustles. My first side hustle when I was a kid was I used to buy flowers and create like boutonnieres and corsages and sell them at high schools for the prom. And you're right. There was a wholesale price for flowers and then there was a retail price. Yeah. Those margins were freaking good. Yeah. But in terms of how you two met, so you got connected through a mutual friend. And what was the initial like concept? Because Pre-Hype was the precursor, I guess, to what you guys are working on now with Audos. So just Henrik, tell the audience, the Pre-Hype story is pretty wild, what you guys were able to do and accomplish. But there was something more, I think, with Pre-Hype that you wanted to get out of it that led to Audos. So can you give us that sort of background?
What we discovered pretty fast, or at least what I discovered, is that I had obviously a few cycles. I was a few cycles ahead of Nicholas in terms of my entrepreneurial career. But what I found every time that I kind of were in between time was that everybody was asking me so what's next? And are you going to go to venture? Are you going to do another startup? Are you going to take a job? And the basic answer was I don't know. I mean, I just came out here. I'm still bleeding from the last thing. What I really wanted was just a space to kind of build cool shit with people I like. I would go around and meet people like Nicholas and then go we should just go and hang and basically create a little bit of almost an artist collective, but for founders. And so what we built up in Pre-Hype was basically that, a bunch of folks that didn't know what to do next, who was kind of in their between time. They needed to make a little bit of money to kind of pay rent, and they needed some camaraderie and some methodology to kind of get going again. And so over these 15 years, we ended up building a bunch of startups ourselves. Some of them became very big, and we built this corporate incubator that kind of helped all these corporations kind of figure out how to build new ventures. That was what financed it all. And then we built kind of a educational unit where we would teach our very specific flavor of entrepreneurship, which we've now codified with AI and then turned into Audos.
And that's sort of the platform that was basically built out of all of these different sort of projects that came to be over the last several years. But maybe, Nicholas, explain in one sentence what Audos is. Why does the world need to have an AI co-pilot now for entrepreneurs?
Audos is as much probably as anything a mission, which is to help 1 million people start $1 million a year business over the next, decade. We help, everyday entrepreneurs take their personal interests and passions and expertise and build AI businesses around that. And yes, we use AI to do that. So we've created an AI co-pilot that will help you do everything from identify the problem you want to solve and start to build a solution to that problem, get into market, find your first 100 customers, and begin an iterative process of what we call relationship capital, which is the kind of foundational layer of a business where your customers kind of trust you and you trust them and you get feedback from them, and then you keep launching new products and services that help them achieve their goal. That was more than a sentence, but it's taking all the knowledge that we've created over the last decade and change and using it to encode some workflows into AI that maybe are not the only path to building a business, most certainly are not, but they are a path to creating something that we feel helps people who have an idea for something, but for any number of reasons, many of which are really good reasons, are just not making progress on that idea. And they're kind of stuck in their head, or they're trying a variety of things, but they're not really getting much traction on it. And so we help them get traction on it. And we believe a lot in what happens once you get going, that momentum is oxygen for new ventures, that when you can reach some sort of kind of escape velocity, really interesting things happen that no one could have expected. And so we are students of and practitioners of the art of getting started. And we think that AI is just a total game changer on that topic, to the point of why does the world need more of these people?
No, yeah, we can talk about that for a long time.
I'll just state at a high level that we believe the world will be a happier place if more people kind of take these entrepreneurial thoughts they have and take some action against them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is culminating at such an interesting time. COVID opened up everybody's eyes to what else to do in their free time because they were sitting at home or probably let go or, put on the bench for something, and then they had to think what other ideas can I come up with to make some money and put some food on the table? And then you have this world of AI that converged right at the end of COVID where people were kind of going back to their day-to-day jobs, but still having that passion, inside of them. And you guys both know this. Ideas are a dime a dozen. But Mark Cuban says, don't follow your ideas. Don't follow your passion. Follow your effort. But finding that effort to get you going is really fucking hard. You need a co-pilot to coach you along to do that. So Henrik, what is the idea in sense of creating 1 million everyday founders building $1 million businesses, as you guys coined them, Donkeycorns? And what is that sort of push and then continue to push up the hill benefit that Audos is providing?
Well, the push is very much, I believe, that one of the backbone America is to build entrepreneurial endeavors, and that I think all of us who love the country kind of like are very proud of like that culture of like not just the big companies that have been built, but also honestly all these SMBs that's been kind of like there forever. And in a world where it's tougher to kind of build like a store around the corner, we believe that you can build a new type of kind of neighborhood company that might not be defined like being only successful if it becomes kind of like a unicorn, but if it becomes a entity that solve a problem for a neighborhood in a very scalable way. And when we think neighborhood, we don't necessarily think kind of a physical neighborhood, we think kind of like your subreddit thread. And so the push is really, can we help the 60% of Americans who say they would like to start something? Only 9% kind of does. Can we make it easier for them to get going? Help them identify who they should serve? What is a meaningful problem for them to solve? And then use AI to kind of create a solution for it. And by then kind of like maybe even democratize kind of like all this wealth that could be created as an entrepreneur. So instead of having only unicorns, we also have some of these kind of $1 million turnover businesses that a bunch of people can run.
Yeah. And before Audos, you have like platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, these freelancing tools, right? You got Shopify where you can create your own e-commerce stores. There's a bunch of these things, but I feel like Audos is not trying to be another platform to host just your business, right? Or like market your business. It's actually acting as like a career coach alongside you. So what are the problems it's solving?
I think that's a super astute observation and something that we really kind of are just getting our head around how we should articulate. Because I think if you look at like some of these platforms before, they've done kind of like similar things. Like YouTube really took kind of an industry of media and then it democratized it. So suddenly people who were like good at the tuba could suddenly create a kind of like a media property. It used to be that you just have to work for Viacom or for ABC, right? And now you can do that. And I guess like Shopify did the same thing with retail and e-tail. And then even Airbnb kind of did that for hospitality. Like they created like a new unit that allow like the everyday entrepreneur to kind of go out and do something. And so I think we're very much believing that now. The gamble that we're making is that you basically will have like foundational models that can answer most kind of things in a generic way. What we're trying to do is to create a program that will really take you the whole journey from the kind of the insight that, hey, I would really like to start something. I think it's going to be an agent-based business. What do I do? And other places will help you make a deck. Other people will help you, code up a website. Other people will give you a class on kind of like how to make an ad or how to talk to customers. What we're trying to do is, if you think of a Replit or Lovable as being kind of like Pro Tools in the music industry, like the output is to make a song, we see ourselves as being kind of like a record label that is trying to kind of like find talent and then really help them through the whole journey of discovering who they want to serve, what the problem is, and all the way to creating like a successful kind of like company.
So it's kind of coming at the same time as like vibe coding, right? Like vibe coding is the concept of just messing around with AI tools, seeing what you can create. And then all of a sudden you got an app that's doing $100,000 a month in revenue just because you wanted to create like a weight tracking app or something for fun. So Nicholas, you guys have just announced you've raised $11.5 million. Obviously people are believing in this mission and this vision. What is the kind of fundamentals of what this business is going to be built around? And maybe give us an example of what you've already seen working with people that have come to Audos with some ideas and built businesses around it.
The fundamentals of the business, as Henrik said, match this concept of can we be in the mode of recruiting entrepreneurs? So our customers, as it were, the people we work with, if we kind of think about the business, we got to acquire customers and we have to, kind of monetize them. The fundamentals here for us are customers are entrepreneurs. We do a variety of things to go acquire them and get their attention and get them engaged and get them onboarded. And we spend a ton of time on that topic because we kind of believe the devil is in the onboarding. And so it's really important. And it's particularly important here because what you're trying to onboard is not just like a human being to like some service, but is like their idea of the way the world is changing, frankly, so as to have an entrepreneurial kind of like vision. So it's quite involved. And then what we do is we try to make money when they make money. And so to the same, to use the record label analogy, if we're going to use that, you don't make money as a record label if the record stinks. In fact, you almost definitely lose money. And so while we're probably not going to be too much in the business of losing a lot of money if things don't work, we are very oriented, more towards a business model that is, probably how Airbnb, for example, makes money, which is they don't make money unless you book your space. And so we are in a kind of revenue sharing, let's call it, style of business, as opposed to a SaaS style, business model. When you think about like what works and what we see working well, we've kind of alluded to it, but it has a lot to do with trying to take some insight you have as a everyday entrepreneur. Typically, this is into some component of yourself, or you've observed something that someone very close to you is experiencing it, and you want to solve that problem. And then you're defining your business and your service much more around kind of who you're helping than by what you do. And so maybe as opposed to saying, hey, I'm going to build a weight tracking service, which we can all observe is like become increasingly very, very easy. What our system would really encourage you to do, and maybe actually for this group, it's an interesting conversation, the difference between going from like idea to app versus idea to business. And we're in the idea to business, and other folks are in the idea to app business. And the difference to us is if you build that weight tracking app, you now have a new question, which is like, well, where do I find my customers? Who are they? And what iterations am I going to make in order to like make this really relevant to them and get them to pay for it and get them to pay more than it costs me to acquire them and go through all these, kind of base objectives. And so the things that we see, working conceptually, that we can talk about them, but they're in these categories that you mentioned, they're in health and wellness, they're in, knowledge sharing of different varieties, but is that the entrepreneur is identifying a group of customers and they're building, and typically for us, they start with an AI app, an AI agent kind of service that helps that group of people achieve some like baseline objective, and probably on a recurring basis. And so weight tracking, in fact, might be the what, but the who is really what matters the most and is what defines the service. And so it might be moms who are trying to get back in shape postpartum. If we think about how many different ways you can use the ability to do weight tracking, it could be people who are trying to get back in shape after having some operation. But these are very different customer groups. And if you talk to them in the same way with the same service, what we've found is they start to become quite commoditized. And then they're probably not much better than ChatGPT at helping you, for example, in this case, do weight tracking just because you used it. And so what we're seeing and what we feel is where our platform is really oriented towards, because of all this experience that we've had over the last 15 years, is really towards helping people identify, not the what of weight tracking, but the who of a certain group of people who need that. And then you build more in product and service and intelligence around that specific use case. And you really ride the wave of frankly, the technology just getting better and better and better. But that just accrues to your benefit if you're the entrepreneur, because you've identified this core group of people that you're really trying to like understand and help solve, more and more and more of whatever they get up having to deal with every day.
That's super fascinating, because the idea to kind of concept is something that a lot of people like just kind of throw darts at a board on, but you're going from idea to business. And like the way we operated our fund is we have a lot of young founders that we back at the inception stage. They have great ideas, but they have no idea who their ICP is and who they should go after. And they just chase all these different opportunities because it's who's ever willing to talk to them. But really what you're doing is saying, hey, don't focus on this group that you think is the right ideal customer for you to talk to. We actually think there's a bigger opportunity or a better alignment with what you're trying to solve for in this group over here. And I feel like you, Henrik, have seen this time and time again over the years of obviously building what you did at Prehype. But what is the idea and diagnosis, I guess, that happens inside of Audos when it comes to founder market fit?
Well, I think it's relatively simple because that's where we start. Like, I think a lot of other people, they start with like, what's your idea? We start with who is the customer you'd like to serve? And that is always the anchor. The second kind of like important point, almost as important, is what's the problem you'd like to solve? We feel if you have a customer you'd like to serve and a problem that is truly meaningful, something that you can state with like, it sucks that, if it's really kind of like, is a real problem, then ideas are just thesis statements that you could throw at that, and that you can test yourself into. And so I think if you look at entrepreneurship, one of the things that I've always been fascinated about is there is kind of like a pedagogy of entrepreneurship. There's different schools of thought, but we always just talked about it like there was one. It's like Gary Vaynerchuk has his kind of school of thought. You have like the lean startup methodology. You have the people who have a business school. Like everybody has slightly their different flavor. The flavor that we've always been very into is this customer founder fit, or what we call relationship capital, which is basically defined with you find somebody you want to serve, you find a problem, and then instead of defining yourself as what you do, you define yourself as who you serve. And so for BarkBox example, as an example, we've always kind of just been big on like serving dogs and their people. And so one of the questions that always come up, like when you've done like a box for dogs, is like, when are you launching cats, right? Because, that would be natural. When you're somebody who serves dogs and their people, like you'll never launch anything for cats because like it's not like even in your mental model. Like you serve like an airline because travel is the next big problem you want to solve for dogs. And so you look at all the businesses we've been successful, having a hand in building, BarkBox or Row or Managed by Q, they're all defined by the same thing. You find one person with a problem, and then you create an elastic supply chain of products and services that you can sell to that specific customer. So I think that's the thing that always been kind of like unique with our specific approach to it.
No, interesting. But you also have this thing about build as taste at scale. What does that mean in an era where AI is generating everything instantly? And I have such a huge opinion around the tastemakers of the next generation of entrepreneurs being the leaders, because AI is like this Russian doll where there's so many different layers of AI being created inside of businesses. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some form of design and customer acknowledgement and sort of adoption from customers saying, hey, I understand under the hood, there's a lot of AI agents working on this business, but at the surface, I want to know there's people there at the top that I can engage with. So what is that taste that you guys are trying to focus on at scale?
It was actually in our conversation like that you've used that term because obviously it's something you've spent time thinking about. It made us think a bit because it's not a word that we've put on this topic before, even though it resonates perfectly. So I'll just say that we're almost kind of like have been wrestling with the word taste in particular since then. One of the things that came immediately to mind for us, and maybe to give you like kind of our angle on the topic, is that taste is as much about like what you do create for people as it is what you kind of like steer away from. And so maybe actually Henrik mentioned a place where we have a form of taste as it relates to how we and our AI systems work with entrepreneurs, which is we won't say to you, what's your idea? We'll say, who do you want to serve? And in fact, if you say, well, I don't really know, and blah, 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 we'll say, well, that would be really great. Like we should try to come up with someone, to the point where like, if you have a thing that you think you're going to build and you're out looking for ICPs, that almost like we should try to like never have that happen. And our AI as a extension of and as a delivery vehicle for our taste should be to say, hey, we don't do that. Or it's not, we don't do that, but we're going to try to help you arrive at a place where you don't do that. And so I think one of the interesting parts is like, how do founders and entrepreneurs decide what they're not into? What is not tasteful, as the case may be? Taste actually by definition is, also, or you're willing to say, that is not attractive to me, as much as you say that is attractive to me. So you can define it by the one minus, if you will. And so I think that's actually a place we probably see a lot of the entrepreneurs, and our system helps entrepreneurs try to kind of encode their taste by things like, what would ChatGPT answer to this question that you vehemently disagree with?
That's interesting.
If you're building like a weight loss program, what is the thing that ChatGPT says is like the generic, definitionally average answer to how do I lose weight that you, based on your experience, whether because you're a doctor and you've got 30 years of experience that says like, that's just not going to work because of what I've seen, or you're just a person who's gone through this themselves and you just have a point of view that that's not going to work. So I would argue, in fact, that we can all look at our own taste in a new and maybe even easier light, which is taste is definitionally non-average. We all now have access to a thing that will tell you what the average answer is. And so just ask it the question that you think your customer is going to ask you and see what it says, and then see where you really disagree with that. And that might actually just be a really easy way of arriving at your taste. And I think we try to kind of encode that into our program at scale.
That's interesting because like everyone's sort of focusing every day they wake up. It's like, what did you accomplish today? Like, what did you do today? Whereas like Audos is actually maybe saying what to not do today. Like who to not sell to, who to not try to approach on this business concept. And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around, but it's super relevant. It's the longest path to get to the best result.
Yeah, well, for sure. And I mean, even a version of that we've spent a lot of time on over the years is like firing some customers. That's a very difficult concept for all of us who have spent time at like the very beginning of building a business, where it is so painful to even get one person to say, here's a few dollars of my money. The notion that you would ever take one of those people and be like, I'm sorry, this is actually just not a good fit for you is so, brutal. But if you're building something where you're trying to kind of like be really honest with yourself that like you have to find tight fit with a certain crew of people, sometimes you got to make a hard decision to like, deselect. But that deselection process happens a lot. And it happens, to your point, from the very, very beginning, which is like making the hard decision that like, I'm not going to just like serve all SMBs, with my new thing, because that's like, 30 million people. Like I probably can't do that yet. I've got to like go down and down and down and down. So deselection, I think is a really important part of what you probably have to do in these early stages, but what our system is certainly trying to help people do.
Henrik, I think it's important for people to understand, like, what does it actually look like in their first 30 seconds inside of Audos, or their first week using it. And then talk about sort of like the tech versus human element of this as well, because I assume you can't automate everything on the way to the, the final destination.
Yeah, I mean, like the product as it is right now is we'll meet you where you are right now. We are running a lot on Instagram where we're basically running ads to say, have you ever thought about starting something, but you don't know what to start? And we use a conversational UI to really just to get going. And then after you've had a little bit of a conversation, we'll introduce you to basically our dashboard where one agent will introduce you to all these other agents that goes through the different kind of elements that we think are important as you're building this. So one agent will help you do your elevator pitch. The next one will help you make a little deck. The next one will help you make the ads, but there will be other agents of, here's the one they use to check in every week so that you can start to see if you have progress. And there is, and I think to the point that you're kind of alluding to, there's always like talk to a human if you just need like the camaraderie and somebody just to kind of jump in. And then, of course, what we do is that we sit and look at all the the conversations as they come along. And as we feel is necessary, we kind of jump in and kind of go like, hey, here's what the trained models say, but like your specific thing is actually special. So like, let's just kind of take that offline.
I got to ask, did the concept of like this Audos multi-agent company building concept for like, let's say a single person happen before or after Sam Altman said there's going to be $1 billion one person company?
It started way before. I mean, like, I'll give you a little bit of the journey. Like, so Nick and I obviously been building Prehub for many years. And then come 2019, I think, maybe late 19, early 20, we got access to OpenAI. Like, this is going to date me, but I remember when the first time saw the internet, right? And this is before it was graphical. Like, so I'm so old that I used to like telnet into it. But I remember telling it into a university server and go like, this is going to change everything. And very much had the same experience when we saw the early chat. Back then, it wasn't ChatGPT, it was like the platform. So we were like, hey, we have like, there's so much opportunity. And all this work that we do right now to help, let's say 10 or 20 people every year build a startup. If we can get this to work, like we can help hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And so got obsessed with that. The first idea was like, let's not even use humans. Let's invent basically startup. And so we coded up all these bots that crawl the internet and it looked for problems. And it basically found a problem. It would create like a landing page. It will automatically generate kind of advertising for it. And it would just make conversion funnels for these products that didn't exist, that we had never seen. And we would get a ping when basically 10 people had put their credit card down for this product. And it was weird. Like literally there was one that was fecal transplant from Olympian athletes to get their microbiome. But turns out there's a lot of people who want to buy that on the internet. Also turns out that it's illegal to do and it's probably not scientifically working. After having done like literally hundreds of those, we were like, hey, what is it that we're missing? And that was the moment that we got very big on, we need to have a human in the middle as the last mile. And then we got very big on this relationship capital. And so we've been building this obviously through Prehub through 15 years, but just in the sense of autos for at least a few years.
Wow. Okay. So that is so interesting. Like there's this concept that you guys saw. I mean, I can't believe you saw OpenAI in 2019 and had 2020.
That may be technically not possible. 2020.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe 2020. Okay. But still, earlier than basically 100% of the world. And so you're talking about this idea that happened at that moment, still recognizing that you needed to have humans there. But then you started thinking about like how you could help others instead of just doing this for yourself, basically, right? Because you could have just started like, 50 businesses, yourself by building all these agents. So Nicholas, obviously, as I mentioned before, raised capital. Henrik, you started BarkBox, you raised capital, you went public. What is the idea concept around capital as a tool when it comes to informing how Audos is going to build its business itself and also maybe support its own entrepreneurs on the platform who may need access to capital?
The reason we've raised capital now, because we feel we can use it as a tool in helping entrepreneurs. So we view the world through this lens of, can we help entrepreneurs figure out what to start and get it going and increase their chances of success? And obviously we think technology can do a lot of that, but it can't do all of it. And for things that are, starting to gain a little bit of momentum, or even that we feel just have a little bit of or the AI feels has a little bit of good vibes, but that the person doesn't have the resources, or maybe they have the resources, but they're just not confident enough to be willing to put them to work. We just think capital can be a terrific tool for kind of unsticking them and moving them forward and getting more of this kind of early momentum that can be life-changing. And so we want to have it as part of our toolkit of things that, the platform can bring to bear to help entrepreneurs make progress and to find and serve and satisfy their customers.
We actually have one thought, if I may throw that in. One of the things that I learned through pre-hype, if you just take BarkBox, for example, I met my co-founder, Matt, on a cruise ship. Different story. He kind of didn't really know what to do next. And so we were kind of spitballing different ideas. And then, we just basically, I think, threw out Birchbox for dogs as kind of here's a space. And so I created the first landing page over the weekend. And then next time I saw him, I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Just showed him my phone. He's like, let's go down to the dog park and we'll show it to people. And then people were like, hey, this is cool. Sign me up when you're ready. And we're like, we're square enough phones. Can you just give you your money right now? And so before we knew it, we kind of had 70 customers. But I think the important part was I had done that little bit of work that just created that little bit of signal that allowed us to kind of go for it. And I think one of the reasons, as Nick was saying, that capital is useful for us is that in a modern way, the capital allow us to create those small kind of nuggets that just attracts a little bit of signal. Because the reality is, when we go and pitch you for for venture, we all sound so freaking polished. This is the only idea that we worked on forever. And we're destined to do this specific thing. But the reality is 2 months earlier, we're I have 5 different ideas. I don't really know what to do, da-da-da. And so capital really gives us, that little accelerant that will hopefully allow us to kind of get 1 million people to get into this business.
I think it's the nudge that a lot of people need. That's why I kind of have a job, is that people kind of need that nudge from us and that commitment and that sort of that tie to say,
and
hey.
It's not just capital. It's kind of weird. I'm sure you have that, just somebody coming into your meeting room and you go, you know what? I think that's awesome. You should just do that. That is just kind of that is really just the best kind of drug a founder can get, because we need something to kind of keeps us going, right? It's not the getting our the door slapped in our faces that does it.
Do you know how many domain names I own that are garbage, basically? Because they're all ideas that I want to have one day. The first thing I did was I just bought the domain name. Yeah. I was like, that will tie me to this eventually, because when the renewal comes up and I got to pay for it again, I'm like, oh, I probably should start
Which one is your favorite? What's the one that got away? The idea that kind of always...
I wanted to create a ski school retreat. I wanted to have a retreat for people to go and do a full ski school, water skiing, not snow skiing. And I thought that would be a cool mixture of outdoors camp, but learning how to do the water skiing experience again. But my wife wrote a book when we were camping and hiking around Yosemite for kids. And so I was like, she's like, I don't know if I should do it though. I'm like, well, you have the book, it's written, but you haven't created it and you have no domain. So I went behind her back and I set up the domain and I created the domain getoutsidebook.today, I think. She sold 10,000 books because I forced her to. Awesome. And then I sent emails to Bass Pro Shops and all these outdoor stores and started going. But it's right. I had
Can I ask you a second question? What is the biggest problem when you're camping with kids?
Oh my God. Camping with kids is a whole other world. But I think the cool thing about the book is that everything becomes an experience. The idea of exploration, a rock across the campsite is exploration to them. And so writing all these different, it was an ABC style book where everything in, the outdoors became part of the book, and we've sold it all over the place now. But my point is that she was not going to do anything with the idea. But if there was someone like your Audos co-pilot that would push them and say, hey, guess what? Your landing page is already up. Or, hey, guess what? I already sent a few emails to people who are potential buyers and they already put their visa into the Stripe API. They'll be like, oh shit, I'm pot committed now. I can't turn back.
100%.
A big part of it, and actually what I'd argue is that what we're often using the capital for at that level, to the point of I've sent a few emails, is versions of that. And it's versions of really just trying to get you, the only thing better, I would argue, for an entrepreneur than the investor type person saying, yeah, you should just do that. That's a cool idea. And giving you that pat on the back is when a customer says it.
Nothing better.
We are we are really trying to collide people. And we basically do everything in our power. And I can't count how many design decisions we make that where we are choosing not to do something in service of trying to get you faster to the moment where you have a stranger, most importantly, telling you, I have this problem. Maybe even I think your solution would be cool, but I actually might not even matter if I think the solution is cool, because the fact as an entrepreneur that I found someone as a stranger, they engaged with me and they said, I have that problem, is like worth its weight in gold. So we really just try to accelerate you, and capital is really critical to this for a variety of reasons that we don't need to spend time on, to getting you to that moment where 10 people, 100 people have said, yeah, I have that problem. It still doesn't mean, by the way, that you have a successful business. There's a lot of work to do from there on, but getting you to that moment of validation as quickly as possible is like what we live on.
I can give you a personal story as well. I have two older brothers. My middle brother is obsessed with ideas. He has a list ongoing on his phone of all the ideas he wants to start, and I usually shut 99% of them down. But nowadays, I just take the idea and I throw it into ChatGPT, and I have a full summary of like why this is a stupid idea. So I don't have to waste time on it. So I just send him like the output from ChatGPT. One of his dumb ideas, which is kind of smart, is like when you step up to a urinal, there's these things called like piss pucks. Basically, it's like the urine just disseminates through it and stuff.
So a Canadian word for that thing, but
very
yes.
Canadian. And what he wanted to do is basically have like logos imprinted on the piss pucks for like, the hockey team they're playing that week. You have the logo on it, right? Or you have like at a bar, you have some other person's face on it that you don't like and stuff. And I was like, that's actually a really good idea, but like, it's pretty stupid. I'm not going to do anything with this idea. But he has so many of them, and I wish I had something like Audos to just send them to. But you must have also had some pretty fast growing ideas. Like, Nicholas, tell me the most concrete, fastest product or feature that Audos shipped end to end, and what it taught you about sort of product velocity.
That we shipped to help entrepreneurs, or that an entrepreneur shipped to help
that you guys did internally at Audos? Because you must eat your own dog food, I hope.
We do. Yeah, we do. We use a lot of our own stuff, but
we use an agency.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of people who are building like product offerings on the system that we deploy to customers that are not traditionally engineers, Henrik and myself included. And that's based on just where technology has gotten to today. And so, in fact, everything that we prototyped we used ChatGPT to make the first version of all of these agents effectively. And so we learned the kind of mechanics of it through it's this like circular thing. Like we used AI to help us make AI, right? And so we've done that time and time again. The latest thing that we spent a lot of time on that was built, though, in the very similar way is we wanted to make tooling that would allow people to create a graphical kind of experience that went on top of and around the natural language experience that was otherwise very easy for them to deploy to their customers. So the example is, if you go back to your weight loss thing, it's really easy, or we have made it quite easy, and it's becoming increasingly easy just generally to make an AI agent that has a kind of a conversational design that you can deploy in some places. And it's really good at striking up conversation with the customer. So if you wanted to make something that would help someone lose weight, it could ask them like, how much do you weigh? And what's your goal? And why is this your goal? And what have you tried previously? And it could do some things that if you tried to turn that into like a GUI, like a form on a website that went through that, you would realize within like 2 people that you had totally up the order of operations of the form. And now you've got to start moving the questions, and doing that through GUI is really hard. Whereas doing it through natural language, you literally just either ask ChatGPT or you yourself just copy and paste the order of the questions, and all of a sudden the thing that changes. But we can observe that there are some places where it would be nice to, for example, like show the person 5 workouts that they could do and give them like the step-by-step and allow them to kind of like swipe through or dismiss the ones that they can't do because it turns out they have a bad back. And that would start to get very complicated if you wanted to do it in natural language. And so we used AI to create a set of tools that allow our AI agents to render graphical interfaces on the fly in order to kind of complement and enrich the natural language experience. But that was all made with AI. That was a non-engineer who made the first version of that before it ever got like deployed into our main thing. And I think that's the nature of the question, is like the pace at which we can do things to respond to the needs of the customer. We basically had a customer who's like, I need to show this meal plan in a more visual way, because it really sucks to tell my customer I'm helping them plan their meals for the week, but I can't show them a picture of the spaghetti carbonara that I want to show them. It just makes it a lot less interesting experience. So can we do something? It was a non-engineer using AI on our side that created a tool that made that possible for our platform to be able to deliver, which I just think is literally is like vibe coding within the company to deploy new products to help, serve the end customer. So
it's basically like instantaneous product feedback loop, right? Where the feedback comes out from the customer to, the business owner into product
and in that
management.
case, for us, it's a business owner, and it's not even like a proper product manager. It's much more like almost like either like a success manager, or it's more of like a business function of, we're trying to help this person be successful. What could we do? And you eliminate the feedback loop that flows it all the way through the traditional I heard actually a great case study the other day of a company that runs a fitness trainer app. So like it onboards trainers, the trainers interact with their customers through this. And they were talking about how they wanted a pricing page built that would help the trainer understand like the different pricing plans in a more interactive way. And if you think about, if you've worked at like a technology company for the last 30 years, like you want a pricing page, like a dynamic pricing page.
2-3 months.
Everyone will be like, yeah, that's really cool. But like, I don't know where we're fitting that in the prioritization. And of course, now it's like built and deployed and whatever in days. It's fascinating.
We would have those whiteboards where you put up the Post-it notes, right, of all the different feature requests. And then you have to put a value associated with it for how much customers it's going to bring in. And then engineering just says no to basically every single one. Right? Yeah. We've all
much less once they build it. And then you're like, oh, actually, it turns out that I was wrong about this one part. And they're like, well, back of the line, pal.
Back of the line, exactly. You know, Henrik, but from pre-hype to Audos, you've always mixed in like education and incubation. You know, do you think Audos could replace accelerators, you know, one day? And how do you think about building the community aspect around this idea of solo entrepreneurship?
You know, like I love any feedback I can on that specific topic. I think it's incredibly important. I'm worried that AI, one of the kind of like the Achilles heels of that is loneliness, right? And so it's something we think a lot about. I think accelerators, in many ways, honestly, they serve their customer is not the founder. The accelerator is the VCs that they're trying to find a cohort for, or the corporation that are trying to find a bunch of entrepreneurs interested in a specific space. And so I think you'll still see accelerators. I do think for us, we hope that we'll be able to find like a space for all these everyday entrepreneurs who are now a little bit kind of jumping between YouTube videos and kind of blog posts and trying to piece it together and then end up not doing it. I think that's probably like more a sweet spot. If you have like the drive and the talent and the connection to get into YC, I think you should get into YC. But I think for, you know, like the hundreds of millions of people that are just like to the left of that, I think we are good. And the reason why I think that is not like a self-dismissive statement is that, you know, I've obviously been part of building a few unicorns like over the last 15 years. And all the people that was part of my cohort of startups that went public, we were all these weirdos that kind of like didn't fit the bill. Like it was like the red-faced Danish dude that kind of showed up in New York and thought he knew about something, right? You know, like all the Austrian guy and like, we were all like not your classic kind of like, the computer science dropout from Stanford. And so I definitely believe that if you are somebody who understands a specific customer type very well, and you have the empathy to really understand their problem really well, then you can build a really good business for yourself. And we would obviously love to be part of that journey.
You know, looking out 5 years, Nicholas, you know, what do you expect, you know, the $1 million founder, the $1 million business look like for everyone who's either on Audos or trying to build something, you know, that looks like an Audos business?
5 years at the pace that we're all going right now. 5 years feels like a
5
really long
months.
time. 5 months. Yeah. It's like 5 months is 5 years. A couple observations. One is I think it has an agent at its core. So it's kind of a special purpose AI agent at its core. So the intelligence has been committed to this kind of central node. That agent can express itself in a variety of different ways in order to meet the end customer wherever they are, including, by the way, if the way that it finds and interacts with the end customer when that end customer is hanging out with a general purpose agent like ChatGPT or Claude, and the entrepreneur who built this kind of agent that helps, I don't know, moms get back in shape postpartum is never actually meeting the end customer because the end customer is talking to ChatGPT about how do I get back in shape? And ChatGPT is basically saying, oh, well, I'm going to pair you with this kind of special purpose agent that's going to help you do it. So I think we're going to see many more kind of agent to agent interactions, but we'll also see direct, end customer to agent interactions. We'll just see them in a variety of different channels. And so therefore, as an entrepreneur, I think what you're creating a set of principles around how does a given goal get achieved by an end customer. You're creating a set of kind of experiences around what makes that kind of joyful. To your point, you're kind of defining the taste of an AI system. And then you are otherwise mostly allowing that AI to find the fast moving current, to go to the edges of the kind of distribution channels that are available to it in order that it can kind of meet customers where they are. I think that's a version of what we think the businesses will look like. And then as an entrepreneur, your job, actually, if you think about what you are doing day to day, our view of that, at least at some level, is you will largely be reviewing almost like two inboxes. And maybe it's not too dissimilar from what entrepreneurship is today, but one inbox is where you watch effectively how your AI systems are interacting with end customers and you're giving it feedback. You're almost like the reinforcement learning trainer. You are telling it, oh, well, I think that wasn't quite perfect. We could do more here. Or, you're basically trying to kind of continuously raise the standard of how your AI, finds, helps, and serves your customers. And so you're in kind of like a review your AI mode. And then the other one is you have a bunch of agents that are doing work for you, and they are your marketing agent and your finance agent and your supply chain agent and your programmer agent. And they are things that are taking the learning from how the overall system is interacting with the end customer, and they're proposing things that might be done, and you're making a decision about how to do it, and you're giving feedback almost like you would to your employees. But if we can reduce the job, and I think it will kind of head this way whether we do it or not, if the job gets reduced to, I just kind of got to get to inbox zero, if you will, at the end of the day, around one, how has my system helped people? Could we be doing it better on the one hand? And then on the other, are there any internal employee agents that need my love and attention right now because they've got questions for me? And if not, then I'm done. If you just do those two things every day, you'll make, undeniable progress.
That's amazing. You'd be an army of agents and you just be like the head lieutenant, describing problems.
Yeah, by the way, it's not too dissimilar from what, I don't know, the CEO of a company does today. I just think we should expect that many more of the employees are.
Hey, Matt, maybe we could ask you a question. How long do you think it'll take before there is a agent-based company that does $1 million in turnover, where they don't have a classic UI? It's not an app, it's not a website, it's just an agent.
No, I think it will happen this year. I actually think we're seeing it now in some of our own infrastructure layer companies where they basically are agents that are managing like pipelines of integrations for a lot of these AI platform companies. They have a website, but they don't have one that customers would go to.
I've asked this question now to 10 VCs that I respect, and none of them have said longer than 6 months away. And so I think it's just like so mind-blowing, but I think still like the conventional kind of wisdom is that you should build an app or you should be like that. The world is just changing incredibly fast. And so one of the reasons why we're excited about these agent-based kind of MVPs that we're really helping people, this world is going to happen pretty fast.
Yeah, I think kind of that question also goes back in time for you, Henrik, in terms of like when you started BarkBox in 2011, you said you put up a landing page, you connected like a Square account. I don't think those things are going to be required to start a business nowadays. Like a landing page, probably not necessary as much as it was before. But Henrik, for you, like if you could have gone back and started BarkBox again, what agents or what tools inside of Audos do you think could have changed the trajectory, outcome, or speed at which BarkBox could have moved?
It's a little bit of kind of like a circle kind of answer, because I think a lot of the stuff that we have now built is based on like the system thinking that we kind of did that. And so I will say all of it could be kind of like I've done, because in many ways.
What was the biggest constraint though for BarkBox? Was it supply chain? Was it, access to customer acquisition? Like what was the biggest constraint?
Scary thought. I think the problems with good ideas, they kind of work pretty fast. Like when things kind of like you hit a real problem, then a lot of time you're kind of like just trying to kind of like hang on to the stuff because like it's just like it's going. The problem is the kind of not quite there ideas or companies, because Nicholas and I will tell you like we are so stubborn that we'll continue and we'll tell ourselves, we have better marketing, or the landing page is a little bit better, we have some more money and all this stuff. And so I actually think that one of the things that I hope we can do with Audos is to kind of like let them try some of these things in a little bit of an easier and cheaper way. And so that they don't have to kind of like spend all this time on all this that Nicholas and I have built that didn't work, that we, kind of conveniently forget to tell about when we get invited to podcasts.
You know what is interesting? I think about sort of companies that instantly have product market fit. Like think about a PPE company during COVID, right? You were just making so much money for doing something that people just need, but you don't have something like Audos or the agents inside Audos who are like, hey, there's a lot of areas we actually need to improve this business, but you just don't have time to focus on them because you're so distracted with like what's going right, that all the things are going wrong. They're like carpenter ants. They're eating away at some of the foundations of the business from the inside, but you don't notice it until one day everything just collapses and takes out the footing. And I think Audos is exactly that, but for someone who doesn't have the time or resources to work on it.
And if you take it back to Bark, like my co-founder, Matt, he had a Great Dane in New York City. He couldn't find cool stuff for it. And so basically that was the problem statement. And it turns out there's a lot of people that had the same problem. And so, like maybe not quite, like those kind of tools during COVID, but like we put the BarkBox kind of website up and people were like, hey, this is cool. Like, can I get it? And so what we're trying to do with autos is don't build these other things first. Find that demand, find that problem. And if you have that problem, then throw all these different things at it. And so we kind of like go at the entrepreneurship kind of journey in a little bit of a roundabout way than what other people do.
Okay, before we jump into our fast favorites, I want to give our listeners one action item to take away from this conversation. So tonight, after listening to this episode, what's the very first thing they should do to see if that something that they hate or something they think sucks should use autos for to test it out?
I mean, I think that is it. I think they should just find something that really sucks. Like if they find a problem that really sucks, I think they're basically 2/3 of the way. That is the thing to focus on. If you can have something you said, it really sucks that, and maybe you ask like a few of your peers that are within that kind of neighborhood and they go like, yeah, that really sucks. Then I think you have the beginning of a company.
All right. Well, you got jump in autos on Instagram, test it out and see if it actually works. Well, before we wrap things up, our listeners always know we do our fast favorites. So first, we're going to ask it to you, Henrik, and then we'll do it over to Nicholas. But for the first one is, what's your favorite podcast?
You know what? I do run a podcast about AI, so I would be a bad entrepreneur if I didn't take this as an excuse to pitch Beyond the Prompt, which I do with Stanford's Jeremy Utley. But I can give you another one. I recently stumbled over If Books Could Kill. It's one where they review airport books. And they are hilarious. They completely destroy these books, and it's really, really good fun.
That's hilarious. Okay, so your podcast is Beyond the Prompt, and that next one just sounds absolutely hilarious. Okay, what about for you, Nicholas?
Maybe it's too cliche. I really think that what Patrick O'Shaughnessy does on Invest Like the Best is just so well done. And I think that the way he's diversified the people he talks to, but also comes back to these like really, kind of inside game kind of investor conversations, I just think is super interesting. So
it allows you to hold on to your Wall Street roots just a little bit.
I guess
while you're an entrepreneur.
Right. Maybe that's the part of me that still wishes I was spreading comps.
So when you're out at the bar, you can still have conversations. I got it.
Yeah,
okay.
I can still use like some sort of terminology that makes it seem like I knew what I was talking about.
Nice. Next is your favorite newsletter or blog, Henrik.
And you can't say your own.
Yes, you can. You can.
I do have a Substack. I'll probably do Ben's Bites. I think it's a very nice kind of like little drip of what has been happening. And I would say a more nerdy version is that I basically create a little agent using Google App Scripts that takes all my newsletters and then it creates like basically my own condensation of all the newsletters.
I love that.
It is such a nice little hack because like now I actually read all the newsletters because I get like a little blurb about each of them and then I can just click it and go in that. And I just got Claude to write the code for me and put it on Google App Scripts. And so that's, I guess, like my agent's newsletter is probably my favorite.
Well, my favorite new thing too is you turn every single newsletter into a podcast. I forget the AI tool they have, but basically you can take like my voice and your voice and it will just write the script about the news article, but you can listen to it in a dual person podcast audio.
Can I give you one idea of that too?
Sure.
I do that with books that I don't have time to read, but I really want to read. I just drop them into Notebook LM and I basically get like the 20-minute kind of like discussion about it. And it's a really nice way to get like all the
This is
insights.
basically the way we decided if our book was ready to publish or not. Whether the 20 minutes from Notebook LM sounded too stupid.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so what's your favorite newsletter or blog there?
I think what Dan Schipper and his team at Every do is really top notch. I think what Packy McCormick does with Not Boring is then like, very long form, very, very, very long form stuff I think is fun. Henrik will tell you that my relationship with email is complicated. So I'm not the best newsletter guy.
Okay, fair enough. Next is your favorite tech gadget, Henrik.
I love
Henrik's favorite topic. Do you have another hour, Matt?
Give me a couple.
I will give you, I think if you just take the basics, the Kindle is just like amazing. And so I'll kind of like put that up there. I just got one of the new DJI drones and with the headset. And it is
wow.
Epic to play with. And then this is going to age me too. I got one of those lawn mower robots and it's mesmerizing. I will stand like for a long time and just stare at this robot and like see how it does its little journey.
That is so funny because the point of the robot is like giving you more time to do other things, but you just stand there watching it mow the lawn instead of you pushing it around. And it's just hilarious. You don't save time. You just save a little bit of energy.
That's
but you're
true.
like, you're just got your cup of coffee looking out the window, aimlessly watching this everything to its work.
Lazy person's lawn mowing exercise. Yeah, sure.
You know what it is? It makes you feel like an emperor or king. That's why. It's like you're watching like your peasants do the like manual labor for you. Nicholas, what's yours?
I feel like going second here is so fun.
Okay, we'll switch it on the next one.
No. I'm very happy to. It gives me a moment to think about my responses. My favorite gadget right now is we have one of these Aura frames, which is like a digital picture frame. But
we just got one.
It's the first one that I actually think has finally like delivered on that promise of that everyone's been working on for like, forever. And my kids we have basically everything loaded on. It automatically loads on, but it's always taking you like 9 months back. And my children love it. And we have it sitting in our kitchen. And just
okay. Literally, you and I are walking the same life right now. I just bought one for Mother's Day for my wife. I never get Mother's Day right, ever. I screwed up every year. And this year, she said I absolutely nailed it. I bought the skylight. I paid for the subscription. And she's uploading photos from her phone daily from work.
Yeah.
They love it. And the kids see it in the morning.
Product. I think it's a great product.
Nice. That's the first time it's been shared. So I appreciate you doing that, making me look good. We'll go with you in this one, Nicholas. Favorite new trend? Put you in the hot seat.
Should I steal the one that I know Henrik has so that I put him in the hot seat?
That'd be great. Do it.
Oh, he was going to say voice to text that actually works, which
that's hilarious.
I actually think, I will say that I've found myself more times in the last 3 weeks saying like, does someone have granola on? Because I do think this kind of like ambient recording, by the way, it poses all sorts of interesting things. I was at a dinner last week where the main conversation around the table was like, in 2 years or 3 years, will you have to actually have some sort of like social framework where we all say like, are you recording? Like, I'm not recording. Are you recording? Like, okay, we're all not recording or not, and certainly on meetings now that like, you don't even have to have the thing drop into your, your Zoom. It's just flat out that like, it's just running in the background and you don't even know. Honestly, I'm so glad that Henrik wrote his answer to this because I was struggling to come up with another one. So there you go, Henrik. Now you get to come up with the second one.
And is it me now?
It's you now.
I just took yours and now you get to go.
Okay, favorite trend. What is a favorite trend? Favorite trend is to be, here's one. Favorite trend is that kids don't have to use their phone as much. I would say our school just kind of like banned the phones. I installed this kind of like, I gave my kid this like very old Android phone and I put a loader on it so it can only do a few things. Read Jonathan Haidt's book, about kids and phones. The trend that we're kind of getting aware of, like phones' impact on kids, is what I know.
I love that. I think we need to do that for adults too. I think the trend that I want to see come back is when we go out for dinners with our friends, I want everyone to take their phone out and put it in the middle of the table and not touch it for the whole dinner. That would be good. And one trend that a guy on our podcast said was he installed landlines back in his house to make his kids use the landline like phones to talk to their friends. Because usually when you're on your phone, if it's like on speaker, you're distracted on some other app. So you're not engaged in the conversation. But on a landline, you actually have to concentrate.
Are you old enough have lived in the landline time where you call somebody and you hope that their parents didn't pick up?
I had rotary phones in my house. That's how, that's how poor we were. But yeah, we definitely remembered landlines and had to remember all the numbers. I still remember some of the numbers, but that's fantastic.
I remember when I didn't have a cell phone, but my friends did. And I would walk around with this little index card, which was like the phone book of everyone's cell phone's number, so that you could at least borrow someone's cell phone and say, hey, give me your phone. And then you call the person.
Or loading up the phones that had the Nokias with the snakes on it, that you had to load up the minutes on it every time you ran out. Definitely. You had to go buy the card. Okay.
At least you got to play Snake.
I think that Henrik's going to have a good one is, mom's a librarian. He reads a lot on Kindle. What's your favorite book or most recently read favorite book?
Not your own.
You can say your own, Henrik.
Pitch your own. It's coming out August 5th, Nick. It's now the time to pitch it.
It's going to you. You got to ask first. You get to do it. I've got a different answer, so you go.
Okay, so we have a book coming out August 5th called Me, My Customer, and AI, and it's basically all the thoughts that we put into building autos. And it basically talks about these 3 points: the new type of entrepreneurs, the new type of company, and basically what can make you stand out in a world where everybody has AI to
It'll be available everywhere, so people can get on Amazon and everything?
Out everywhere.
Pre-order on Amazon now.
I love the name of that book. By the way, that's a fantastic name. Okay, cool. August 5th. We'll make sure the link is in the notes.
Idea.
Okay, so then you guys both have the same answer for that one. And last but not least,
I had a different book. But
you did? Okay.
No, I'll just drop it because it's a little bit related to the kids not looking at their phones point, which is the book Range, to the extent that it starts out as a discussion of the difference between Roger Federer and Tiger Woods' kind of upbringing and the arriving at being great, whether through utter dedication to one thing or trying lots of things. And I think in the AI age, as you think about like the lesson of that more generally, I'm also thinking about Henrik's podcast here in a recent episode they had with the CEO of the Atlantic, and talking about how like practicing the things that make you particularly human, making you also better at using AI. I just think that as people like explore their own range, the AI is just going to really help you do that. And it's going to help amplify the benefit of that. And so I've been interested to kind of reread that book also as a parent of young kids.
That I got to check it. So it's called Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. That is a fantastic book recommendation. I'm going to definitely check that out and send it to my tennis friends. Last but not least, we ask our favorite life lesson. So we'll start with you, Nicholas. Favorite life lesson before handing it off to Henrik.
It's one that I've like figured out that there's some scientific backing on, but I otherwise credit to my grandfather, who lived to be 99 years old and just like the happiest guy until I remember the last day that he was alive. He was looking out the window and he was just like talking about how beautiful like the brickwork was on the building across the street. And anyway, the lesson is that there's actually positive endorphins that go through your brain if you choose to smile. And so, for example, they tell Ironman athletes that you should smile because you're going to cause yourself to have like a little bit of positive energy. It's tiny, it's marginal. They've even tested this that if you were like being tortured, it becomes a reverse psychology thing. So you might not want to do it because you might piss off your torturer more, but that you would benefit from forcing yourself to smile because actually just the act triggers this like basic psychological thing. Anyway, I guess the point to me, and maybe that can be completely debunked, but I believe that whole hog, it's like this thing of trying to come to grips with when do you just put on a positive attitude because it might actually just have some benefit to how you feel and behave and what comes next.
I love that. That's like James Bond in Casino Royale when he's getting beaten up and tortured and he's just laughing and smiling the whole time.
Well, it turns out it was all just like a way of getting a little bit of an extra endorphin rush.
Okay, so when I lose the next deal, I'm just going to laugh and smile. Okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much. And over to you, Henrik.
I mean, like I heard Richard Branson once, if you only had one advice for an entrepreneur, what would that be? And he said, go to the gym, which I thought was interesting. Because I do think that sometimes we get so obsessed about our companies and we lose kind of like the realization that there's other stuff. And we lose the realization that we have to take a little bit care of ourselves once in a while. And so I'll pass on the go to the gym.
Absolutely. I love that idea. Well, thank you so much to you both for joining us in the tank today with Henrik and Nicholas from Audos.